Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Bryan Smith. He is the owner and president over at Bluetrain. Bryan, how you doing today, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Logan.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to talk with you about some steps that folks can take for better analytics and reporting when it comes to analyzing all of their marketing efforts. Before we get into that, I would love to give listeners a little bit of context, some of your background, what you and the team at Bluetrain are up to, why you're the guy talking about this today. So I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you and the team are up to these days.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So I guess just, real general, I have a long 18-year kind of plus marketing career. So that's my background, both agency and kind of multiple B2B in-house roles. About 12 years ago now, so 2007, I founded Bluetrain, which is a digital marketing agency. We are up in the North, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So yeah, we are an Oilers fan here, but sad that the playoffs started without us, of course. We're a very focused kind of data-driven digital marketing agency. So that what that means to us is, on an ongoing basis, we manage clients, search marketing, all types of online advertising. So Google Ads, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Content marketing. So working with content editorial calendars and blogging and promoting that on social media, as well as the advanced kind of web analytics across everything, and which is what we're going to be talking about today. I guess to finish that off and segue is just that I've been working with analytics since it came out around 2005 or so. So I've had a long history with it, and so it's something that I have a passion for, and that's why it's our topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bryan, let's jump right in. Let's give a little bit of context around, some of the common limitations or pitfalls, roadblocks to really doing better web analytics.
Yeah, the big thing that we see that often companies that we come across have a lot of limitations to better reporting, better tracking. And the reason why is that, it's a combination of one, they just don't have time, which is, common for many different tasks. And two, they often just don't have the skill set. Like they really want it. They really want to have better reporting, but they just don't know how. So that's a big one. And then it kind of gets a bit more specific in terms of often they can get that base level implementation, but they can't get that more advanced to really understand what goals are happening with their marketing and on their website. So it's nice to have that high level of the visitors to your site, but it doesn't really add value from a decision making perspective. Another one would be just having the time to maintain the reporting, to be a little bit more accustomed as your business evolves and your marketing evolves. If you just have the same old report that's never changed, not really adding value, right? You really need to kind of keep evolving that and customize it to, as your campaigns change, as your channels change. And that's a big thing people just struggle to keep up with. So anyway, those are, a few aspects, but it's really the skill, time, experience, and, trying to get better insights from it that companies struggle with.
Yeah. And, the question I had there as you think about, the time investment kind of leads right into the first step that you wanted to unpack. And that's, that it really starts with planning. And one of the things in my mind is that so much time and effort and energy goes into, a website design or a redesign, into the UX, into the look and feel. And then after it goes live, it's like, oh, wait, hold on a sec. How are we going to manage the reporting here? Can you speak to that mindset going in, and then maybe talk about some of the other things during the planning phase that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I often use the phrase with SEO, with search engine optimization, that a lot of times people will, build these beautiful sites. So we call it kind of planning the party, but then they don't invite anybody. And I find analytics is very similar to that, in that, people put all this effort into, hours and hours and thousands of dollars into designing and building these amazing websites that they think are amazing, but then they don't put any effort into setting up proper tracking to find out, did it actually work? And are they actually getting, the kind of key outcomes that they wanted from that massive undertaking? So that's a big thing that we see. And so, hopefully by the end of our chat today, that's the kind of key takeaway I'm hoping people will come away with, is to start to change that and to really put way more effort into the process for implementing analytics, and to do that, in conjunction with building that new website. Put as much effort into ensuring that you know how to analyze it and get results from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, we wanted to break it down into 3 steps to think about. And as we've touched on already, it starts with planning. You really break that down into discovery, a measurement plan, and then selecting a tool set. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the important things that folks should be thinking about during this phase?
Sure. Well, yeah, if we start with discovery, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. From an analytics perspective, what we're trying to do there is really understand the current state of your site. So, I mean, this is something you can do yourself. And anything I'm going to talk about today is something, you don't have to do with an agency. You can definitely do with an in-house team. So, it's really about like looking at what is the current state of your tracking, of your analytics. What, from a business perspective, do you need to track moving forward? What are existing, goals and implementations that you have, and just really doing an inventory of everything that pre-exists. And so that you're going into it with eyes wide open is very important.
So as you move from discovery and you set up your measurement plan, what are some of the things that folks need to be thinking about there in this planning phase?
Sure. Yeah, measurement plan. There's lots of synonyms for that. I mean, it can also be called, a measurement framework or a measurement schema. What we're trying to do there is to take everything offline before we get into the tools and start setting things up. We want to make sure we plan everything through, kind of like, for a website design, how you might go through the process of, wireframes or, kind of design mock-ups before you really start building and coding a site, right?
Right.
Same thing with analytics. We want to, often it can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet and just putting everything that you want to track down on that sheet, and then going that next step further of naming conventions. And the reason that's important is that what you want is consistency, and you want a certain way that when your reports kind of roll up and you're looking at it 6 months down the road, that everything makes sense, that you're not questioning, what was this goal? I don't remember what this was about, right? And that's really important. The other thing that we find is helpful is to also look at some visual mapping of that. So, if you're, as an example, wanting to, track certain buttons on the site, certain call to actions, or, very common for a charity, as an example, to track all the donation paths through a website, to visually, take some screenshots of that and, circle it and show what you're going to be tracking, so that you can communicate that to your other stakeholders on the team, so that everybody's on the same page and is in agreement with what you're going to be tracking moving forward. So those are a few things that we're doing in that measurement plan. So it's really about, kind of that list of everything we're going to track from actions on the site, everything we're going to track from what we call conversion goals. So that, like, completion of forms, clicking on email, downloading, watching videos, all those kind of key actions on a website. And then, what are we going to name them, so that we understand how the reporting is going to be presented down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, Bryan, in the next phase of planning, you're a big proponent of now selecting your tool set, but make sure not to leave out, a dashboard reporting tool. Your
Mhm.
analytics tool set should be kind of the start, but a lot of people stop there. Tell us a little bit about, what you
Sure.
recommend thinking about in selecting your tools and selecting a dashboard to layer on top of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, a lot of times, this is kind of an assumed stage that everyone's just going to use the most popular tool like Google Analytics. But
Mhm.
there are a lot of different options to consider here. I think things that we always look at are just like, what are your needs? What existing website technology do you have? What software does it need to connect with potentially if you have other data that's important to integrate into your reporting? So there's some other things you may want to look at, and of course, budget is part of that. A lot of times the free Google platforms are the way to go, and we've used those, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager platforms, all the way up to large enterprise banks. So it's usually there's not a limitation there for size of organization, but there are
Mhm.
other options, and it really depends on each unique situation. So just be aware that there's other options and just to look at it. The other thing that you mentioned is the dashboarding. So if you selected as an example that kind of tool set of Google Tag Manager, which is that tag management solution for implementing analytics and implementing the event tracking, and then Google Analytics for the actual reporting interface, it often doesn't get you where you want to from a visual presentation of the data. And what I mean by that is, out of the box, Google Analytics has some great reporting, but it's limited from a dashboard perspective. They don't look amazing. It's got limited number of kind of data widgets you can have, or columns of data you can have, the customization of what you can connect in terms of bringing in other data. So that right away, as you get into this, you usually find that it's just not serving you the way you want, especially if you have other stakeholders like executive that you want to report to, right? You
Mhm.
want it to you
Right.
want it to look a little bit more simple and more visual, have nicer pie charts and all these type of things, and that's where a
Mhm.
dashboarding tool will come in. And there's lots of great ones out there. That if you're staying in that kind of free Google stack, it's typically something like Google Data Studio will be that choice, and it's a wonderful tool. So it's definitely something to look at. But there's other great ones. There's Tableau, and there's Power BI. There's a whole bunch. And again, it kind of depends on the usage and what else it's going to be interacting with. So, but
Yeah.
definitely spend some time there and really find a reporting tool that works for your needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you're through this phase of planning and you've selected your tool sets, the second step in this process of really getting going with better web analytics and reporting is setting up these tools, setting up both
Mhm.
analytics and reporting. So let's take that analytics side first and talk about some of the things you should be thinking about in the implementation phase here, Bryan.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that kind of now we're into the meat of things, and we've got our plan in place. We know what we want to track. We know the tools we're using, so it's really now diving into those tools and configuring everything. Typically, if we're going to stay with the most common, which is kind of the Google side, that's starting with Google Tag Manager and really implementing all that kind of tagging and event tracking. So we're gonna, like, every navigational item you want to track, all the button clicks, and all the forms, everything that you're trying to achieve in terms of a tracking perspective gets set up in there. And then you're moving to that analytics tool. In this case, usually Google Analytics, and that's where what I'd recommend there is to think a little bit broader than just that out of the box kind of view that they have, but to think about what are your different needs as an organization. So typically that means that you're going to want to have some sort of filters. So usually that means creating a few different views of the data. So that might, as an example, one that's filtering out your internal traffic, so that when you're looking at things, you're not looking at your staff using the website. In some cases, you might want to look at that as a separate case as well.
Mhm.
Like
But at
school.
least separating it out, right?
100%. Like school boards sometimes are interested in that because they have their own IPs often, and so it's interesting to see how the staff from the school boards and teachers are using websites, right? So, and then there's that next level as you get more advanced of what are other different audience segments you really want to analyze differently. So those are the type of things you want to be thinking about and setting up. So an example that might be, you really want to look at urban traffic versus rural traffic, or you want to look at out of country traffic versus in country, like just little things like that, and you can quickly set up segments that allow it to be a lot faster and easier. The other thing that we're doing in analytics, of course, is the conversion goals. That's, like, what are the real important outcomes? And again, I don't know if I've clarified this very well, but there's a difference between, those events on the site. And so an event might be tracking every single download on the website, but not every download might be an important goal, right? So let's say you had, 50 PDFs on the website, but maybe one of those PDFs is an application form or a registration form. Well, that's the true business goal, in terms of that you want to track, right? So that's the one you're going to measure your campaigns and your success by. It's not the other 49 PDF downloads. Those might be just nice information for understanding how people are using the website. So that's the difference that you really want to understand. And so you want to set up those conversion goals of those key outcomes that are going to make a difference and you're going to make business decisions from. So usually that's going to be completion of forms and emails and really important downloads, things like that. Maybe, click to call, kind of mobile phone calls and things like that. Yeah, it's kind of the analytics setup. Of course, there's lots there that you can unpack, but those are some examples of what's going on there.
Yeah, exactly. So when we were talking about setting up and selecting the dashboard tool as we look at reporting now in the setup and implementation phase, what are some best practices you recommend to clients or you'd recommend to listeners, Bryan, in setting up their dashboards and what they're going to be using to really visualize the reporting on a regular basis?
Yeah, good question. I think something that we found really, really effective when you're getting into setting up the dashboards is to think about what questions you're trying to answer and to try and format your dashboard reporting in that way. To the point where you're literally, the heading of, as an example, let's say you had a table of data or you had a pie chart of data, that the question that pie chart or table is answering is the headline above that data set, rather than something like page views or bounce rate, right?
Right.
So just the reason why is it just resonates with people better, and two, it makes it a lot easier for high level stakeholders to understand and read. So if you're a executive and you get a report from the marketing department or something, and it answers simple questions such as, where are our users coming from? Right. And then there's a nice table below, it just makes it really comfortable for those people to read. Right. Or what technology are our users using? So just thinking about what are these questions that are important for us, right? Is really, really helpful.
Yeah. Really simple change, but I think that can be wildly effective in the effectiveness of your reporting and your dashboards as you bring in other people.
The one last piece there that the power of going to these dashboarding tools that a lot of people don't necessarily use is the ability to bring in external data. And that's one of the big drivers to kind of get away from just the out of the box kind of analytics dashboard and to like Google Analytics dashboard, and to go to something like Google Data Studio or, a Tableau or things like that, is you can think about what are the other data sets that either you have already in your company or external data sets that you can integrate with your marketing data that really add value. So, example of that we've done is with weather data. So if you're a utilities company, as an example, you're trying to understand the correlation between what happens from a website activity with what's happening with weather, pulling those things together in a dashboard and showing a line graph is very, very powerful way to make decisions and to have some amazing insights. So that's something that, is the real value of those tools that a lot of people can take advantage of moving forward. The other thing is it's not just your website data. You can pull in all the data you have from the third-party platforms like a social media platform like Facebook. You can pull in, maybe you have a third-party call tracking platform that you're using for tracking phone calls. You can pull that. So you can pull everything into the one place rather than having it all siloed, which just adds a lot of value for your marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryan, so we've talked about the planning phase and some really specific things around selecting the tools in the setup phase. Number two, as you were touching on there, some really great ideas around best practices in thinking about your analytics and then how you use the reporting, what tools you select, and then how you present that data to other people within the team. And really the third piece of the puzzle is, a commitment to ongoing analytics and reporting, what are some of the things that tend to fall off at this stage that you recommend to folks to continue to get the benefit from better website analytics and reporting?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think one of the most common things you see is that people set up analytics and then it's kind of a set and forget it. A couple things happen. One, they just aren't looking at that reporting, right? So there might be amazing data in there, but there's no rhythm in place, nothing calendarized to actually look at it and use that data. So that's one thing that's very common. The other thing that happens is things change and things break, right? So you may have set that up and it was working perfectly. And then a few months later, you make some adjustments to your website and you forget about the analytics and it breaks because you're not looking at it. And then all of a sudden, when you do want it, you go back and you've got, months of broken data of, as an example, maybe no conversion goals are being tracked. So then you're not getting that insight. So what we encourage is to not stop after that setup, right? To find that ongoing rhythm, ideally a monthly rhythm, if not more, of generating the reporting, analyzing and looking at those insights. And that's really where you're going to get the value, right? The other thing that starts to happen is as you start using and analyzing that reporting, you're going to start evolving it and it's going to become more and more valuable. As you start to figure out which questions and which metrics aren't really adding much value to you, then you dump those and you bring in the ones and you focus on the ones that are. And that's where it just, everybody starts to get more educated and you start to get a lot more, value from making decisions, which is the whole point here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think the other thing, of course, that is, sounds common sense, but, is very, very important is if you're looking at that data on a regular basis, you are going to find issues so much faster rather than someone stumbling across an issue, a couple months, 3 months later, which is underrated in terms of the value of spotting something quickly and getting on top of it, which can really have a big impact on your results.
Absolutely. So I love what you're recommending to folks, the very practical stuff to apply, Bryan, in the planning phase, in the setup, and in ongoing use of your analytics and reporting tools. This has been a great conversation filled with a ton of applicable stuff for folks to think about, both from a high level perspective down to the specific tools that you recommend looking at, in each phase. If anybody listening to this, Bryan, would like to stay connected with you or ask any follow-up questions on this subject or otherwise, what's the best way for them to reach out, man?
Yeah, good question. I mean, definitely our website you can always touch base with at bluetrain.ca. Me personally, I'm a big LinkedIn guy, so I'm happy to always connect with people on LinkedIn and talk about digital marketing and specifically analytics. So those are probably obviously we're on all social media platforms, but I mean those are probably the best ones for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bryan, this has been a great conversation again. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.